Greetings and welcome to Zord's Modded Space Program, episode 4. We're going to launch a lot of things in this episode, so let's get started. This first ship is one of the modules that's going to be my mission to the moon. In fact, the entire episode is going to be modules that are going to be part of my mission to the moon. Now, the reason I'm not just launching a Saturn V, and believe me, I tried to launch a Saturn V, is because, well, I don't know if it's me that's not very good at constructing rockets, or if it's the game that's not very good at simulating the physics for something that big. Because, yeah, maybe I put up a video later of all the failures I had, but fair to say, it was a lot of failures. If the rocket didn't blow up on the pad, or just snap in half on the pad, it would explode sometime before first stage separation, and this happened without fail for 2 straight days of testing and constant tweaking. So this is what I came up with as a solution. You split the payload up into reasonably sized chunks. This is the LEM, the lunar excursion module, or the moonlander for short. And this is, of course, only part of the mission packet. We're gonna have to have a command module with the engines, and we're gonna have to have a stage that puts us on a translunar trajectory. So we break it down into these 3 big pieces, and then we launch them separately. That's the basic plan of what we're gonna do, and as you can see, we have not exploded yet, so this is far more successful. And as you can see, this craft is unmanned, it is robotic. The crew is going to launch as usual with the command module. And that way they also have an escape tower if something goes wrong. And believe me, it goes wrong a lot. I just took the parts that didn't go wrong and put them in this episode. So we're flying over this island, it's pretty far away, and we're not yet in orbit. This is a bit worrying. We're not even completely out of the atmosphere. So this launch is very far from optimal, but we have sufficient fuel left that I'm confident that it's going to work. And yeah, trying out the flight computer, just in case we drop out of communications. Even though, yeah, no, we don't face the risk of dropping out of communications, because I built this wonderful satellite network that has very good coverage of low carbon orbit, which is exactly what I wanted to do. Quite pleased with that, I must say. And there we go, the craft is in orbit, so now we wait for something like 24 hours until the Earth has rotated once and the Space Center is at the same position with regard to the orbit as it was when we launched the first craft, but then there wasn't an orbit there. So now we're launching the second part, which is, as you can see, the command module with the crew. The launcher is exactly the same, but the payload is quite different. It's also a bit heavier, so we're gonna have slimmer margins, and we're gonna have to try to match an existing orbit, so this is gonna be a lot harder. It is also going to take a long time, as you saw that the last one did, so I'm going to make it more of a highlight reel. Now we're approaching Apwest and we are staging again and getting rid of the tower, which is always very excited to get loose from the rocket. And now you can see the construction there, that we have a nuclear engine attached to the command module, which is not quite Apollo style, but I took the liberty because this is hard enough as it is, and yeah, I'm gonna try and do severely harder things later on. So if I can make this, I'm still gonna have greater challenges ahead. Don't worry. Anyway, we got ourselves an orbit, and now we're gonna try and match it as good as we can to the orbit of the lander, and we're gonna have to try and make it not match enough that we can synchronize them, because right now they're very out of phase. And this is where we run into some of the higher difficulty with this real solar system mod. The Earth is a lot bigger than Kerbin, and this means that we can't just push our apoapsis out and expect to get an encounter soon. rather we can spend a lot of fuel to push our apoapsis up a little bit and wait several orbits, as you saw I just did, and then we get an encounter. And even if the nodes are right on top of each other, you can still have a separation of 10 kilometers because the planet is so much bigger. Anyway, we have done this and we are almost at our encounter. We have to do one more orbit and we fast forward for this and until we come to the actual encounter. You can see it's a few kilometers away, and this is it. We have arrived at the lander module. Now we're gonna slow down, match velocities, and gently approach using RCS. And this takes forever. I mean, it takes a long time in the stock game. In this game, it takes a lot longer. I try to be more careful because I know it's a lot more expensive to get fuel up here. So you try to use as little as possible and you don't want to break anything, and the physics are a little bit different because you have different masses. But it works. I have arrived and we have all the parts we need. Now the question is, do we have enough fuel to do the translunar injection? And the answer is no. So I'm going to have to send up fuel tankers. Luckily for me, rather for the space program, fuel is free, so it doesn't matter that I'm using tons and tons of it to supply a little bit of fuel to a rocket that I could potentially have launched in a single stack and used a lot less fuel. This is the first out of 3 tankers that's going to get up and refuel the, I'm gonna call it Jupiter 5 mission, because you can't call it Saturn V because that's taken, and this is not a Saturn V. So this is a relatively simple construction with asparagus launcher until we have the central stack left, and when the central stack releases from the last stage, which is where we're at now, the last stage is revealed to be also the payload, because the last stage has a lot more fuel in it than is necessary to get to orbit, so it uses this surplus fuel to refuel the mission. And we just got ourselves an orbit. So now follows lots of tweaking and corrections, and eventually we get ourselves a close encounter, an approach, which we're on now. We're going to match velocities, and then we're going to inch our way slowly towards the Jupiter 5 vehicle. Now, this wasn't planned when I launched the vehicle. My original plan was to have sufficient fuel from the beginning to do the translunar injection right away. So therefore, this vehicle doesn't have any extra docking ports. So in order to access the fuel tanks, we have to separate the vehicle and dock the fuel tanker to one of them, transfer the fuel, and then redock them together and throw the fuel tanker away, throw it down into the atmosphere. And to do this, I decided that it would be best to use the command pod for the docking, because the command pod is manned by Kerbals, and suddenly with remote tech you have an incentive to use Kerbals for your missions. You don't have to deal with light speed delay. And that's very good, because it gives you a reason to bring Kerbals other than to bring Kerbals. So then you have to deal with, the extra mass and everything. So here we go, docking, nice. Now, as long as every resupply vehicle I send can get there with more than, 14,000 units of kerosene and an equal amount of liquid oxygen, you should be fine using 2.5 vehicles. So this is one, and the other 2 I'm gonna send maybe between episodes because it's very repetitive. Maybe give you a short highlight reel next time. There will be no more in this episode. All that's left for this episode is to bring this guy back, dock him to where he belongs, bring these 2 together so that they don't drift apart during unattended orbit, we have a window we're gonna have to keep between the launches of the supply vehicles. So yeah, it takes a while, naturally. And we're gonna have to deorbit this thing. And a little bit of fuel does it. So it's going down, and the video is over. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye!